Greetings to the anointed. God begins to act when he ceases to warn. They believed they were getting away with it. Every caution was discarded, laughed at, and disregarded. However, what occurs if God himself becomes impatient? Warning, it's not pretty. Despite the fact that 70% of people believe in karma, divine judgment occurs sooner rather than later. When God intervenes, he writes the entire tragic story rather than settling for poetic justice. The adversaries who won't listen are now awake with a disease that no physician can identify, no amount of money can treat, and no connections can help them get away from. The warning was not taken seriously by them. They have now received something far worse than remorse. Hold on tight. The main tale starts at this point. First of all, the last warning has passed. God's tolerance is not an exception. There is a countdown. Time was running out. Regardless of every warning they disregarded, every haughty deed, and every second they believed they were untouchable. Silence, they thought, equaled safety. They were mistaken. This is the last warning. Here, accuracy is more important than chance. Despite every opportunity to go back, they chose to double down. More arrogance, dishonesty, and devastation greeted any chance for mercy. Their patience, which they once mistakenly believed to be weakness, has now become an unbreakable force. There is no announcement made when judging starts. There is just a change that is so obvious that it takes their tranquility before it ever reaches their body. No flashing signs or loud music. Doors first cease to open. After then, people begin to go. What used to be easy suddenly becomes difficult. Their influence, relationships, and wealth are all impacted in addition to their health. The weight of divine judgment causes all they erected on conceit to fall apart. It's already too late when they comprehend what's going on. Their throats are suddenly choked with prayers they never bothered to speak. They search for ways out, but there are none. The consequences, not a warning, are what remain when their abuse of patience has run its course. This is God demonstrating to them what occurs when warnings are dismissed as jokes. It's not just karma. They aren't laughing anymore. Second, their illness is more than just a physical one. Their illness affects not only their physical health, but also their entire life. They may initially refer to it as bad luck, a rough patch, or something they can resolve. However, this is more than just a fever or exhaustion. From the inside out, this collapses. Once confident and sharp, their mind begins to work against them. The same deceptions, and manipulations they once perfected now backfire. They forget things. They question themselves. Where there was once arrogance, anxiety now creeps in. There is no way out of a mind that won't stop thinking, and the weight of their own dishonesty is catching up with them. Then they begin to lose their soul. Control, influence, and dominance, the things that used to make them feel powerful, no longer fulfill them. They feel exhausted, restless, and empty. They used to laugh at faith, mock humility, and dismiss warnings. Now they desperately search for peace in the very places they used to ridicule. But peace doesn't answer them. They ignored it for too long. Next, their legacy begins to rot. The respect they demanded is gone. The loyalty they counted on is fading. People around them start distancing themselves, not out of hate, but out of instinct. Even those closest to them can sense when someone is marked for downfall. Their name, once a source of fear or admiration, is now whispered in pity and warning. This sickness isn't just a punishment. It's a mirror showing them what they've become. They thought they were untouchable, that consequences were for other people. Now they realize the worst kind of suffering isn't just physical. It's watching everything you built disintegrate while you're still alive to feel it. And no medicine, no money, no power can fix that. Number 3. The delay was their trap. They thought they were winning. Every time they got away with their actions, they felt invincible. No consequences, no setbacks, nothing but success. They took the silence as approval, the lack of immediate punishment as proof that they were untouchable. What they didn't realize was that the delay wasn't mercy, it was a setup. God doesn't always strike instantly. Sometimes, He lets people dig their own graves, giving them enough rope to tie themselves up in their own mistakes. Every extra day they thought they were getting away with it was just more time to expose their true nature. They weren't savvy. They were being observed. They weren't lucky. They were being permitted to believe their own fiction. Now, the trap is closed, and they don't even know when it happened. One moment, they were on top, and the next, they're surrounded by the repercussions they promised would never happen. Their own actions sealed them in. They were never safe, just blind. They look back and realize every warning was a test they failed. Every extra chance was an opportunity they wasted. They could have stopped. They may have changed. But their pride kept them marching on, further into the collapse that was always waiting. Now there's no way out. They mistook delay for escape. They mistaken quiet for absence. Now they understand. Too late. Patience wasn't permission. It was the ultimate countdown, and time just ran out. Fourth, they made their disease themselves. They were really sowing the seeds of their own demise, even if they believed they were gaining authority. They considered every deception they committed, every plan they initiated, and every act of manipulation to be cunning and a kind of control. They were unaware that every action they took was contributing to the illness that would finally engulf them. Lies propagate, change, and resurface with greater vigor than before. Their own reputation is currently being destroyed by the lies they spread to harm others. The same individuals that they used and discarded are now the ones exposing them, turning against them, and making sure they have nowhere to go. The game of manipulation is only effective when you are in charge. However, the same strategies they used begin to backfire the minute they lose control, even by a small amount. The allegiance they purchased, the relationships they coerced, and the trust they pretended all fall apart. They are now the ones being duped, outwitted, and left behind. And since it teaches you how to destroy, sabotage is the most deadly weapon of all. They were specialists at demise because they spent so much time conspiring against others. However, what occurs if their own strategies are employed against them? What happens if their name is now attached to the same traps they set? This is a complete circle of repercussions, not a coincidence. They had no option but to get back what they had sent into the world. The disease they currently face was created by their own actions. What's the worst? They are the only ones they can blame. Fifth, they chuckled too quickly. When you warned them, they laughed. When they got away with it, they chuckled, because they believed that consequences were only fables used to frighten the weak. They laughed. They laughed too soon, though. Silence, they thought, equaled safety. Since nothing happened right away, they reasoned that nothing would happen at all. They failed to realize that there is no noise associated with true reckoning. Like a sluggish poison, it strikes silently. Like a clock that only they can hear when it's too late. Everything appeared normal at first. Their routine remained the same and life went on. Then, however, the little details began to change. Once easy-to-open doors remained closed. The once present support gradually dwindled. Their armor of confidence started to crumble. Instead of exploding, it collapsed gradually, piece by piece, as they continued to stand there and act as if nothing had happened. And that laughing is no longer there. The same lips that made fun of it are now muttering in terror. The same individuals who disregarded the warnings are now watching them closely to see when the last blow will be delivered. They were too preoccupied with laughing to see the storm that was building over them. They believed it to be a prank. They are the joke now. Sixth, Their authority was borrowed, not given. Persuaded that they were entitled to their position of authority, they exuded a sense of authority. They forgot that everything they had was always alone, and they mistakenly believed that privilege meant permanency. Because of their position, power, and capacity for dominance, they believed they were untouchable. However, loans have terms, and repayment is mandatory after the allotted period has passed. The deterioration is gradual at first. The same individuals who used to listen intently to their every word now hesitate. Their orders don't have the same force. Their desire for respect becomes a duty. People wait for the opportunity to quit out of fear rather than devotion. The change then becomes irrefutable. Their choices backfire. Their power decreases. They are now rejected by the same system that helped them rise. Despite their best efforts, they are never able to fully retain the power they have stolen from the cosmos. They failed the test, and it was always a temporary post. The bill collector has finally shown up. What about the interest? It is accompanied by loss, shame, and the gradual understanding that, despite their ascent to the top, they were only ever a renter in a mansion that was never theirs. They are now unable to stop all they have created from slipping away from them. They believed they had been picked. They believed they were unique. They now realize, however, that authority may be abused, and once it's gone, it never comes back the same way. They thought their circle was loyal, so they used terror, intimidation, and manipulation to establish their empire. However, power-based loyalty is hired, not owned, and is thus unreal. Additionally, the dedication of individuals around them deteriorates the minute that authority does. The shifts are, first, minor. People no longer respond as rapidly. It seems like the forced grins are tighter. The people who used to listen intently to everything they say now nod absently, already searching for a way out. Deep down, everyone knows that the water is rising, and nobody wants to be close to a sinking ship. At that point, the distance is indisputable. Without them, conversations take place. Behind their backs, decisions are made. Those who formerly praised them are now whispering about their demise. And like survivors fleeing a burning house, their allies disperse when the illness, the judgment, and the repercussions become too evident to ignore. The knowledge that they were never genuinely respected, only feared and useful, hurts them more than the betrayal itself. They're neither now. Their once loyal circle completely deserts them, leaving them to face the reckoning alone, as they lack the strength to keep each other together. They are suddenly pushed away by the same hands that cheered them on. The voices that formerly spoke up for them now act as though they have never met them. And for the first time, they realize that loyalty is put to the test when you fall, not when you climb. Eighth, say, they will not have their petitions heard. They never imagined that they would require pity. They laughed at the notion of divine justice, disregarded consequences, and derided religion. They ultimately fall to their knees as everything starts to fall apart. The sky, however, are still quiet. They yell, but nobody responds. They cry, but nothing helps. They are no longer able to access the same God they disregarded and the same grace they spit on. They disregarded him for too long, not because he isn't listening. When hubris is boundless, grace isn't. They squandered time, opportunities, and warnings. They now want forgiveness because they are in pain, not because they have changed. They only regret the results of their deeds, not the acts themselves. Heaven, however, is not duped. Another ploy is repentance that is motivated by suffering rather than sincerity. And God is not amenable to trickery. Before their crimes turned into their illness, they were at ease in their transgressions. Before fear became their shadow, they were unafraid to defy authority. They grab for mercy like a drowning man does for oxygen when they finally realize what they've done. only to discover that the waters have already engulfed them. They turn their backs on God, not the other way around. They discover too late that certain doors don't remain open indefinitely. Number 9. There is no way to reverse divine judgment. They lived their entire lives thinking that there was always a way out of a problem, a cost, a favor, a gap. They had people, money, and influence to clean up their mess when issues occurred. However, none of those things can help them now. Tests are performed by doctors, but the results are incomprehensible. Therapies don't work. The most skilled experts give up. It's a punishment from above, not a physical illness. Once the answer to all problems, money is now useless. They would sacrifice all for relief, yet bribery is not accepted by heavenly judgment. Relationships break down. The influential individuals they used to rely on are now quiet, aloof, and indifferent. When they were at the top, influence meant everything. But now that they are losing ground, it has no meaning. Although they ask for assistance, no one wants to be bound to a sinking ship. The one thing they refuse to do, humble themselves, is the only remedy. Their pride outweighs their suffering. Even if genuine repentance may make all the difference, they continue to imagine they can outmaneuver, outthink, or outmaneuver their way out. However, divine judgment is non-negotiable. As a result, they continue to be imprisoned and suffer from an illness for which there is no label, treatment, or way out. Their conceit prevents them from reaching for healing, not because it is impossible. 10th, their sins will correspond with the symptoms. They paid a price for every deed and transgression they did. And now, the most appropriate method of payment is being made for that cost. The falsehoods they spread? On them, they are choking, suffocating their power to speak. Every lie that escaped their lips has returned. What used to come naturally now seems difficult, as if they are drowning in their own words. They are now unable to express anything other than their remorse as the truth they disregarded screams in their throat. Those hands that grabbed things that weren't really theirs, that aimed after possessions, authority, and power, those hands are wilting now. The very fingers that seized something that wasn't theirs are now tense, shaking, and becoming weaker. The deterioration of their own body is a reflection of every act of selfishness and every avaricious grasp, and the poetic justice of it all is too much for them to overcome. Their ailment is more than simply bodily. It is a result of their sins. The penalty is specially designed to match their transgression, like to a suit of vengeance. They are reflected in the mirror that their actions have made. But this time, they recognize their own shortcomings. They are no longer able to conceal themselves behind the authority they formerly had or the others they previously controlled. The ailment serves as a reminder that everyone is accountable for their deeds. The penalty is neither blind or arbitrary. It's ideally crafted to demonstrate to them that the same hands that formerly took from others are now taking from them. The strongest will fall the hardest, according to number 11. The hardest collapse is coming for those who are at the top, unassailable in their haughtiness. They never thought that their invincibility was a myth, or that their power may be a vulnerability. They were too strong, too untouchable, and too certain that they could avoid the repercussions. Their collapse will now be as loud and obvious as their ascent. Not only do they lose everything, but everyone is watching, which is what makes this collapse so terrible. They are now being destroyed in front of the people who previously idolized them, who watched their every action and clung to their every word. And they perceive something more profound than a simple failure. It's a reckoning. Piece by piece, their once unstoppable empire begins to fall apart. What used to be so solid is now breaking down in the most visible way imaginable. The murmurs start. What might have happened? Is this a judgment from God? The same individuals who previously trusted them are now doubting all they stood for. And the solution is clear. This is something a lot more significant than a simple tumble. They believed they would not face any repercussions, but now everyone can see the reality. Because their pride makes the crash unavoidable. The strongest people fall the hardest. Additionally, others are affected when they touch the ground. Everyone in their immediate vicinity is shaken, and even their most devoted supporters begin to question whether this was more than just fate. This may have been something far bigger. Number 12. The lowly shall be exonerated. They believed they were safe every time they denigrated you, denied your value, or made fun of the ferocity of your religion. They thought their supremacy was undeniable and their rule was safe. They were unaware that everything they did to denigrate you was being recorded, not only by time, but also by the cosmos itself, which they misjudged. You won't have to do anything now while they struggle to grasp onto what is vanishing. No amount of retaliation will ever be as loud as their collapse. All of the pain they inflicted on you, the mockery, the rejection, is returning. It won't be subtle either. Their struggle and eventual downfall will serve as your evidence. It will serve as the universe's affirmation that you have always had faith. Since their own deeds had already prepared the ground for their demise, you didn't need to pursue revenge. You'll remain steadfast as they rush to remedy what can't be fixed. Your patience, humility, and quiet faith, things that were formerly written off as weakness, are now being acknowledged. And you'll ascend while they burn and collapse in the devastation they've caused. You just remained grounded, not because you retaliated. Their demise is your validation, not simply their punishment. It's the world realizing that you were correct all along, that your secrecy wasn't a sign of weakness, and that your faith wasn't childish. It was power. 13th, the message was for you, not for them. The message was never about them. God didn't require their understanding, transformation, or repentance. It was always about you, your faith, your development, and your fortitude. They weren't supposed to learn from their conceit, their disdain for cautions, or their mockery of your beliefs. You were supposed to learn that lesson, not because He wanted them to suffer, but so that you may understand what occurs when pride clashes with divine justice. God let you to see them fall. This is a confirmation for you, not a test for them. You've been being modest, living in faith, and having faith in a plan that you weren't always able to see. God used their ascent, their haughtiness, and their mockery of your silent power as a backdrop to illustrate to you what happens when justice is served and patience runs out. Their victory wasn't the point. It was about you realizing in your heart that nothing can defy divine timing. In order to increase your faith in God's plan, you had to see the results of hubris. It bolsters your conviction that God is constantly watching and waiting for the ideal opportunity to demonstrate His justice, regardless of how loud the world becomes or how strong the hubris appears. Understanding that every action you've done in faith and every time you've relied in God's timing was never in vain is more important than gloating over their failure. Now that you've witnessed the force of divine justice in action, your faith is strengthened. Their conceit ultimately proves to be their downfall. They disregarded the warnings until it was too late, smiled too soon, and took their stolen authority for granted. It was a divine reckoning, a justice they never expected, but that was always assured, that brought them to ruin, not a random act of ill luck. They sowed the seed for every lie they uttered, every deception they carried out, and every time they made fun of your beliefs. The bitter fruit of those seeds has now been born. However, their annihilation is not the subject of this tale. It has to do with your ascent. The teachings they missed were intended for you, to strengthen your soul, to demonstrate the power of humility, and to serve as a constant reminder that divine justice is always just. Your patience, your faith, and your calm fortitude were never in vain, even when it appears like it's taking longer than expected. They were never as untouchable as they believed, but they were unaware of this. Your confirmation is their downfall. You never had misplaced faith. You've seen what happens when the divine and pride collide. You now understand that God's justice is always strong, despite the fact that it is sometimes subtle. Therefore, remember this as you stand strong amid the rubble they left behind. Your success lies not in their loss, but rather in your own strength, intelligence, and unwavering faith. You will rise unfazed because you always trusted in something far more powerful than the transient power they previously possessed, even if the world may have witnessed them fall. Don't keep this to yourself if it speaks to you. To demonstrate your support for the truth, like this video and leave a comment. I'd love to hear your opinions. Give this message to someone who needs it. To ensure that you don't miss any uploads, subscribe and enable alerts. Your patience never runs out, your faith is strong, and divine justice always comes at the perfect moment. Keep in touch, be resilient, and let's develop as a team.